Hello, I'm Chaz Ebert, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the last panel in our 2020 Ebert Symposium series on film and media at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. When the College of Media and I started the Ebert Symposium together in 2018, our vision was to shine a light on topical issues within cinema and media studies. My late husband, Roger Ebert, graduated from what was then known as the College of Communications in 1966. The college was later renamed the College of Media to encompass a broader range of interdisciplinary studies, as well as a growing knowledge of how technology intersects with communications and media. But the goal remained the same: to study how communications and media bring together different peoples and cultures to inform, entertain, educate, and ultimately help us all to live together more harmoniously. This year, the media industry, and indeed our world, have seen some incredible challenges. So our first panel focused on film production and exhibition during the coronavirus pandemic and in the wake of the protests surrounding the killing of George Floyd. Our second panel in the series focused on the impact that documentary film can make on public engagement with social issues. I would very much like to stop and thank all the participants who have shared their expertise with us in all of the panels of the Ebert Symposium series this year. Now, today's panel, we focus on representation in media, and I'm pleased to introduce our moderator, Professor Angarad Valdivia. Professor Valdivia is a research professor in the Institute of Communications Research and the Department of Media and Cinema Studies. She is a leading voice in the field of media studies and also a major scholar of gender, transnational popular culture, and Latino studies. Her latest book, The Gender of Latinidad: Uses and Abuses of Hybridity, came out this past year, and she was recently recognized as a Fellow of the International Communication Association and as a Distinguished Scholar by the Cultural Studies Division of the National Communication Association. All three panels in our series can be found streaming at our EbertFest YouTube channel on the link below. Now, please welcome Professor Valdivia.
Welcome to the Ebert Symposium panel. Today we're talking with Christine Simmons, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. She also oversees the Office of Representation, Inclusion, and Equity for the Academy. She was instrumental with the task force in putting together the Academy's new inclusion standards that will be required in time for the 2024 show. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Great. We're very excited to have you, and it's such a wonderful opportunity for us to engage with somebody who's actually had a hand in developing some of these lists that we all dream and fantasize about.
Thank you. It definitely was a true community effort, a village, from our governors to our members to our film community. But I definitely am honored to be able to help support, and it's so important.
Right. So if I could just ask you, how many people roughly were involved in putting together this list?
When it comes to the inclusion standards themselves, countless members of our staff to an amazing task force led by our governors in Devon Franklin and Jim Giannopoulos, our amazing board president, David Rubin, and of course, our CEO, Don Hudson, were key members of our senior leadership team and governors that did it. And then we had tons of staff, but also, one of the things that we're really working on doing is partnering more with the community, the film community. And historically, the Academy might have been known to maybe make an announcement and then afterward, then share it with folks and kind of bring them up to speed after the fact. We really engaged the film community at every different level going into this and getting buy-in and seeing what we could push, what where there were, some angst potentially, and work through that with folks, because we knew the more buy-in we got on the front end of our inclusion standards, the more successful and impactful they would be.
Right. And so how long was this process in terms of getting all these many people to get to this list? That's quite impressive.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. A lot of it, so we had already begun a number of our diversity initiatives, specifically around A2020, where we looked to double the number of women and those from underrepresented ethnic and minority communities as part of our membership base. And then a piece of that also led to 3 additional seats on our board. And that was back in 2016. We were already looking at what was the next phase? It's 2020, right? We had met and exceeded some of those goals. What's next, and then this summer happened, and with the murder of George Floyd and all of the social unrest, and just the lens on the inequities that communities of color and women and all of our underrepresented groups have been facing, especially in Hollywood, right? We accelerated it, and we accelerated our plans, and we actually took on a lot more. So the inclusion standards is actually just one piece of it. But I would say from summer, we shortly thereafter announced the task force was being formed to come up with the inclusion standards. So it took less than a year, honestly. It was an aggressive timeline, but we knew how important action was and an action plan, and that it couldn't just be our work, our support of these communities. We knew that it had to be actionable, and not just something that would be felt as performative. At the same time, we know that these are iterative. We know that this is just a starting point, and that we wanted to get us going and then continue to look at the data as we go, and see how we ratchet it up from there. So we know we held on to the phrase progress versus perfection. And so we wanted to make sure that we made continuous progress, knowing that it's not quite perfect yet, but we'll continue to work on it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the fact that you say that this is not just a performative action, because I think we're all familiar with task forces and reports that go into file cabinets, and that's pretty much the end of that task force, right? Having been involved in my fair share of them myself. So you say that this began pretty much in 2016, and I know that was the year that you had a Black female president in the Academy, Cheryl Boone Isaacs.
Yes.
So is that something that comes out of part of her charge?
It was all of it, right? So, with any organization, especially a nonprofit, one that's led by a board, we have a sizable board. They're very passionate, all of them, artists in the community. But yes, of course, Cheryl Boone Isaacs, we call her CBI, absolutely had a big part of it, as did our CEO, Don Hudson, at the time as well, and subsequent presidents after that. So it absolutely was the start, but we've built on it, and excited about it. So there's so many aspects that led to this, but now we're really excited about looking forward. And also, though, not denying our past, right? We were acknowledging it. We realized the role that Hollywood, that the Academy itself, that we have a past, and there's no denying that. But how do we truly come together, talk about that past honestly, and to our point about actionable, create action plans? So we created Aperture 2025, and as I mentioned, the inclusion standards for Best Picture are just one of the elements. Anything from unconscious bias training required for our Board of Governors and those on our branch executive committees, which are the leaders who help us grow our membership base in a more inclusive and representative way. They're all required to do our unconscious bias training, as well as the staff. We also are looking at, how do movies get nominated? And for those, we have a lot of folks on our call, I'm sure, that know the process. And if any are like me, 2 years ago, before I started working here at the Academy, I didn't quite understand the 4-year consideration billboards and all the marketing strategies that the studios put forward on the films. And so what we also want to do is create year-round viewing of all of the films. So that way it's not necessarily beholden to whatever marketing strategy a studio may have, because we oftentimes see that films that have more diverse content sometimes don't come out around that time, or maybe don't get the marketing dollars to promote it so that people vote for it. We are also looking at all of our brilliant programs that are developing the next generation of filmmakers. And I could go on and on and on for days about those. And many of those have been in place for decades now, but we're being very intentional about making sure that there is representation. Understanding each of the unique communities and the challenges that face them. You know, the challenges that face the Black community are different than the Latino community, are different than the disabled community, the Asian, Native Americans, so on and so forth, women, gender, all of these different things, sexual orientation. So how do we make sure that we're looking at each of those, being intentional about the challenges that face them in Hollywood, and partner with our members who are the ones making these films to really truly make impactful change. So Aperture 2025, like I said, was very intentional. We're talking about broadening the lens through which excellence is recognized. And it truly is, while we have a date on the end of it, it really is just how we're going to do business. And then finally, the Office of Representation will really look at how do we do business? How does the Academy walk the walk? You know, we have nearly 500 employees. We do business with a lot of different vendors out there. How do we make sure that we're spending our marketing spend in diverse communities and with multicultural publications? We're looking at our investment portfolio, all of these different things, making sure that our library collections and our film collections have diversity and representation within them too.
And the reason that, as you said, but just to kind of reiterate it in case people don't understand, is Aperture 2025 is because we're 4 or 5 years out in terms of production, right? So you cannot make demands or requirements into something that's already on its way, because the whole process takes 4 or 5 years, right?
Yes, for some films it does. And then especially we want to be sensitive. Our industry has been extremely affected by COVID, as we all know. And so production has been truly affected. So many productions have been pushed out. And we really want to make sure that we're on the front end of the process of filmmaking, right? And so usually, to your point, very well put, it can be anywhere from a year, 2 years. Animated films are even farther out, you know. So one, we wanted to make sure that we took into account COVID. We wanted to make sure that we took into account just the general process by which movies are made. And then, because again, we want to integrate this. This has to become just the way people do business. And so if it's something that's out of the normal process, you know, being intentional about reaching out differently, but if it's out of the normal filmmaking process, then it won't be as successful. So we wanted to make sure that it was. And so the first couple of years, while we will require folks to submit their information, they won't have to meet a certain threshold until till our 96th Oscar show in 2024. And again, it's for all of those reasons. And then also so they can build up the talent base, and that we can help them do so as well. So we really wanted to make sure that it was sustainable change. And we know if we push too hard, too fast, that it might just shut it all down. So how can we ensure success for the long run, and for the next 93 years of this organization that we have, but most importantly, so we get representation on screens sooner, because it's needed.
So yeah, so I wanted to follow up on you know, some of the questions that I've been asking it. And it's one of the things that happened after hashtag Oscars So White 2016
Sure.
was that there was an effort to expand the membership, right? And because the membership of the Academy, then that's where the voting comes from. And so I was
Yes.
wondering how that's coming along in terms of the diversity of the membership that might make more inclusive decisions.
I really appreciate that. And you're right. It's so many folks don't understand how the voting happens. And it is truly through our amazing members. And so a big push was to make sure that we had as many voices possible that are part of our membership. So we did meet and exceed those goals. As I mentioned, that was our A2020 initiative. And so it was doubling the number of women and doubling the number of people of color or those from underrepresented ethnic and minority communities by the year 2020. So we did meet those goals. And then we also, as I mentioned, added three board seats to the board, specifically to have more voices of diverse voices, I should say, on the table or around the table. With that said, you know, we knew that that's not enough. It's not alone. And while we are slowly diversifying our membership base, At the same time, there's still more work to do there, and that is something that we're still continuing to focus on, because it is one thing to have all those different voices to be able to cast their votes on what they feel should be celebrated that year. But it's also all the other pieces that I mentioned of aperture, right? So how do we change hearts and minds? Many of us have biases that we're not even aware of. And so how do we help people understand that even our folks who may even have the most pure intentions and really believe in representation, we've been taught for quite some time what a film is, or what it should be, or elements of it that typically align with mainstream dominant cultures. There's lots of other ways to tell stories, and those can be just as excellent as the other. So we wanted to make sure that in addition to continuing to continuing to diversify our membership, we're still doing that, still working on that, and still very intentional about it. And that's not only domestically, but it's internationally as well. And we're really excited to grow our international membership base. But we are also looking at, okay, how do we change hearts and minds? How do we help with the next generation to support and plug people in and get people opportunities? How do we continue to support our youngest filmmakers and get them knowing all the amazing opportunities there are in film, and then, oh, by the way, put on a great, diverse, beautiful representative show and open a really gorgeous museum while we're at it. So all of those things are now what we're taking on in addition to diversifying our membership base as we started in 2016. So it's going, everybody has progress. We all have progress that we're trying to make on this. So we're looking forward to continuing it and not stopping until we truly see the change that we all want on our screens.
Great. I like that multi-pronged approach, right? Not just one thing, but so many elements that have to work in concert to move the project forward. Now, when you're saying you doubled the women and people of color or minorities, so what does that make in terms of percentages? So now that you've doubled the women, how many women are a percentage in total? And the same with, minorities.
Thank you for that question. So excited. Our goal, we definitely met and exceeded our goal as it related to diversifying our membership base. And this year's class was 44.8% women and 35.9% people of color, or those from ethnic and multicultural communities. So we're still moving the needle. And that was this year's class. So as we look at the totality of it, still work to do, but excited to continue the progress that we're making and being so intentional about it.
I mean, I was really so impressed in 2018 when A Fantastic Woman was included, and the protagonist of A Fantastic Woman was a presenter, being the first transgender presenter in the history of the Academy. Of course, I don't know if you know, but I'm from Chile, so I am very proud that we from Chile are able to bring that to the world.
I love it.
It was such a wonderful, wonderful movie, which, as you may know, was not really shown in Chile because of originally because of the subject matter. So thanks for those numbers. When do you see, in terms of looking down the pike, there being proportionality in terms of representation?
That's a good question. But I mean, as you know, we at the Academy are kind of towards the end of the life cycle, if you will. So as we continue to look at the entire journey of an artist, right, we have to make sure that we're partnering with our studio brethren and sisters. We have to make sure that our unions are also working towards this goal as well, because we can't, if folks aren't meeting the criteria or haven't had the opportunity and gotten the credits in the industry and the jobs that they need, then they don't become eligible as members. So we have some work to do in the industry concurrently while we make the intentionality of what we do. So we've already begun to look at our criteria and say, okay, historically, has any of this caused exclusion inadvertently? And so let's look at the criteria for each of our branches, so that which we have control over, that we absolutely can be looking at it and thinking about it with an eye for inclusion. So it's really hard for me to estimate the date by which we would have proportionality, because we depend so much on the entire ecosystem. But that being said, we are, like I said, now leaning into that. Okay, got it. So in order for us to be able to meet our goals, we need to partner with our our film community so they can help us meet our goals, right? And so that's where the inclusion standards also came from. We have this beautiful trophy that a lot of folks are aspiring to get. And so if these studios are aspiring to get said trophy, then it's important that we see representation. And we really see it as the ability to tell more stories. There was some concern around, confining artists. And to be quite honest with you, I feel like it liberates artists even more. Now you have all these other tools that you maybe hadn't been using in the past to tell that story and make it even more rich and more authentic and more beautiful, and also both in front of and behind the camera. So those inclusion standards are key to influence our film community so that we can create more opportunities, so that we can create more Academy members that are representatives. So a very long answer to say it's hard to say, but we know that that's where we want to be. That's where we are very intentional about going. And we are doing everything both in our power that we control, but also that which we influence to help us all get there.
I mean, this is the whole thing, right? It's you look forward, you're informed by history, and then you set a utopia, right, to kind of reach towards. You don't know when you'll reach it, but that's what you're aiming for. You're aiming for that better place. You're aiming for that perfect place. If we could switch gears a little bit, but still talk about issues of diversity, I am curious about the long history of genres that are considered Oscar worthy. I think that that kind of common sense about what genre even gets considered for an Oscar is itself the result of gendered and racialized kind of categories. Can you comment about that?
Well, at the end of the day, we love movies, period, right? So we're here to celebrate movies, to preserve the legacy of movies. And, our hopes, again, as we broaden that aperture, then that broadens our aperture of excellence, period. And we got to see some beautiful newcomers to what people would typically think an Academy movie would be, a nominated movie would be, both with Black Panther in a couple years previous, and then, with our international film, Parasite, winning last year, which we were also excited about. So while Parasite itself, from a genre perspective, was a little different, to have an international film as Best Picture was phenomenal. And it's showing how folks are beginning to broaden their aperture. We're going to say it at least 6 or 7 times today, so that way we can continue to talk about this. But you're right. We do want to talk about all these various genres because so many of them are inspirations for works of art, and so those are things that our artists and our film community are discussing. Our members are passionate about recognizing everyone's art, and we know, and us at the Academy, if you come to our library, you'll see everything from cult films to comic films to horror films to all of it. So the Academy itself is deeply rooted. And in fact, in our new museum, you'll see so many beautiful genres represented throughout. So slowly and surely, I think we're getting there. Again, back to, we all have biases. And so the way we can continue to look at these things is as our branch executive committees and our members are taking these unconscious bias trainings, they're starting to see, oh, you know what? There are lots of genres that are excellent as well. So we support it. We love telling all the different stories there are. They're artists, they're filmmakers, and so we hope that they too will continue making them, and then we'll begin to celebrate them.
Thank you so much. You've mentioned a couple of times how you expanded the number of members in the board of directors, right? So can you speak about that board of directors? How large is it? How diverse is it? How hard is it to get in it? Like, can I get in it or something like that?
Great question. Well, first of all, they are a phenomenal group. They are a big group. There's 54 of our board members represented, and we have 28 men, 26 women, and 12 people of color. So we definitely are seeing more and more diversity around that big board table that used to be, we used to sit around in our 7th floor conference room at a headquarters, but now we see a bunch of Zoom screens for our board meetings. Really proud of the intentional efforts to get more representation on that board. We also enacted board term limits through our Aperture 2025 program or initiative. So that way we can continue to have those voices come through while having the brilliance and the legacy of those that have come before us. As it relates to how you become a board member. So basically, once you become a member of the Academy and you're in your branch, so let's say you're in the editor's branch, then the editor's branch then elects folks to their branch executive committee. The branch executive committee and those members, they also then elect 3 governors from each of the branches to represent them at the board. And then there were 3 seats that were appointed for to make sure that we were being representative and inclusive with diverse voices as well as a result of the 2016 A2020 initiative. So is it difficult? I think that it's just a matter of getting to know your fellow members and getting to know you, how passionate you are about this beautiful film community, and how you want to lead the organization. It's really, they're amazing. They're volunteers. They lead committees and read scripts from our 75, well, we had 7,500 entries for our nickel screenwriting program, and we end up narrowing that down to 5 at some point. So they volunteer, hundreds of them volunteer to read those scripts, hundreds of them volunteer to watch our Student Academy Awards and be judges for that. Whether it's our awards and eligibility committee or our membership committee, there's tons of committees, our international film committees as well, where they all get involved. And so the more involved as a member you are, then the more, as with any organization, then the more likely you are to likely be elected to the board. So once you become a member, anybody can be a board member. It's just a matter of putting in the effort. And we want as many of those voices at the table as possible. And we have some phenomenal people helping us lead this organization into the future.
Okay, so this has been great, Christine. It's so wonderful that you took time of your busy schedule to talk with us. I'm sure you will be an inspiration to our students, to our faculty, and to those members of the Ebert community who sign in and take part in these occasions, these events. And I hope that you don't mind that we keep you in our community, keep you in our hearts, and ask you to continue to inspire future generations of movie producers, actors, and all of the wonderful people that go to make the wonderful movies that we so enjoy and love. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this amazing event. And we are here, we're excited, and we welcome those future filmmakers and all of our amazing programs at the Academy that they can check out at oscars.org. But thank you again for having me.
Joining us in the second part of this important conversation are 3 University of Illinois alums, 2 of them from the College of Media, who have excelled in their professions as creators and representatives of diversity. We begin today with Troy Pryor, also a graduate of the University of Illinois, a BA in 2007 from the Liberal Arts and Sciences College in Communications, and currently a U.S. producer, actor, and public speaker. His stage, on-camera, and voice-over work has led to award-winning content, including collaborations with ABC, HGTV, Warner Brothers Entertainment, DIY Network, TV One, and Aspire TV. Troy is an advocate for connecting local, undiscovered diverse talent to mainstream content and media platforms through his production network, Creative Cypher. His collaborations with Oscar and Grammy-winning artists and their foundations include Che Rhymefest Smith, Kanye West Donda's House Organization, and Commons Common Ground Foundation. These partnerships have enabled Troy to mentor hundreds of up-and-coming artists and empower production deals that build Chicago's artistic community. Also joining us is Carrie Carpenter, a trade journalist turned TV producer / writer. After graduating from the University of Illinois with a master's degree in broadcast journalism, Carrie set out for Los Angeles. From a job as an executive assistant to Tyra Banks, to later producing several seasons of the hit show America's Next Top Model, E! News, and for networks like ABC, VH1, Warner Brothers, The CW, and Lifetime, Carrie has also transitioned into the digital space where she has pioneered and created diverse content for brands like La Mer and Target. Creative producing for Target and YouTube's popular comedy series collaboration, Let's Target, featuring Tiffany Haddish, Angela Kinsey, and Sean Evans, and written Target's first live stream show hosted by Tyra Banks and Isaac Mizrahi during New York Fashion Week. Welcome, Carrie and Troy.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Our third guest is Samantha Chapman. Samantha Chapman was supposed to join us today, but we're taping on November 4th. And as you might know, results of a political election in the United States have yet to be finalized. And as a broadcast journalist, she is on the air, on the spot, working as we breathe. So we'll introduce her, and hopefully she'll be able to join us in a future event. Samantha Chapman is an Emmy Award-winning journalist. She received her Bachelor of Science degree in Broadcast Journalism from the University of Illinois with a minor in African American Studies. She currently serves as a consumer investigative reporter for ABC 7 Chicago for the weekday morning newscast. If I may move to a question about production, since you're both creators and therefore involved in the production of media, production-wise, have you encountered instances where the presence of a diverse media workforce results in more inclusive content?
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times, because I've been on both sides of the camera. There have been times where I'm at a table read or I'm reading copy for something, and you wonder who wrote this or who approved this. You know, you're reading this and you're like, you know what? This had to go through several channels to get to me before, as a talent, I'm going to do this. So what was going on in that room, or what wasn't going on in that room? Who was in that room or who wasn't in that room? How many times have we seen something pop up on television and you're like, I know there weren't any Black folks in that room. You know, there's something that pops up and you say, okay, I know there weren't any women in that room when that decision was made, because you can clearly see the influence in the media that goes out, and why it is so important to make sure there's not only diversity but inclusiveness in the production of these projects. And on the other side, you've seen projects that have come out, and you'll notice when care was taken and attention was given to nuances and things that just can't be generalized, and not looking at a demographic as though everyone is the same, and there are different nuances in everything. And so it's just important to do that. But yes, I have definitely seen it on both sides where it has been clear that there's been a lack of, or there has been diversity behind the camera.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like the coordination or the correlation couldn't be more direct. It's almost, we work from, and we act and we think and we speak and we create based off of our personal experiences and personal relationships. And, like every story is motivated by something. So I think that if if only one type of person is in a room, or one gender or one race, or then that is the story that will come out of it based on that gender's experiences or that race's experiences. And I know a lot of times when we're producing and creating, for example, like on America's Next Top Model, when we're coming up with photo shoots, we literally sit in what we call our war room and throw ideas against the wall. And it's like, okay, what's happening in the world? Who have you talked to this week? What's a fun story from this? And we literally just go around and continue to share experiences until something comes up. And so if there aren't people represented in that situation room or war room, then those stories are less likely to come about or be told.
Thank you. It's so important to have at the production level a certain level of representation. And if I may follow up, because I feel like also in academia, we are representing scholarship, right? And what happens is, if you do not have a critical mass, just having one person there does not actually make that much of a difference, because that person is the lone voice and often gets, in many subtle ways or maybe unsubtle ways, silenced or not listened to. So could you both speak to the issue of critical mass? Because the research shows that it's not enough to have one or a token person, but that there needs to be a critical mass so you have the power to speak and affect a change.
Yeah, so that, I mean, is so true, because same thing. So a lot of times I've been at a job where I'm the only person who looks like me in a room, and you question in your head, you're like, am what I about to say stupid? Like, is this dumb? Is this a good idea? Is it bad? Because it's almost like a vote, you know. I know it's election week, so it's like it really is kind of a vote sometimes, and that's how a lot of ideas happen. You know, if a bunch of the room agrees to something at a job or on a show or in a, you know, on a set, then if enough people are like, that's a great idea, then it happens. So if you don't have backup, or, you know, if you don't have more than one person who thinks that's a good idea, it might just be that the people in that room aren't onto the trend, or they're not onto that experience, or whatever it is. And you really could miss the boat, or miss a really critical moment or story if there are not enough representatives in that room.
Yeah, from a board standpoint, there have been several institutions that I've been a part of as a board member where I was the youngest in the history elected. Now, fast forward to today, a couple of years have passed, or the only in the room. And I've had similar experiences where you're going to propose an idea and you feel a little awkward about it because you don't know if everyone in the room is going to get it, if they're going to understand it. And I've been in situations where I have just toiled and toiled and toiled on how to communicate this, how to articulate this. It's so clear in my mind, but how is it not landing when I speak in this room? And it just oftentimes doesn't happen until you see a bottom line change. You know, we talk about how diversity and inclusion is important, and it is, but sometimes it takes looking at the effect that it has on revenue being generated to really see, listen, this is not just something you should be doing because it's what you should be doing. Your business will work better if you apply these things that we're saying now. And to Carrie's point, you know, it is important to have allies. There have been several times when, you know, something has been proposed, but there isn't a critical mass in the room. So it's tough to get that second. And sometimes, you know, it isn't so much that there is opposition plenty of times, but sometimes it is just that we have different life experiences. And sometimes you have a small window to get someone's attention. And we, as people of color, have become accustomed to finding ways to communicate this message, whereas others may have not had to think outside of the box or their bubble. Where we've always had to figure out how to fit this in to the budget, how to fit this in to the storyboard, how to fit this into the game plan. And so I personally believe, and I know in my experience, oftentimes people of color become uber resourceful because the access to resources or the voting power has not always been there. So we can't approach it like others can approach certain things. It has to be so on point, crystal clear, and right to the point to be able to get through sometimes. So we've always had to figure out ways to get it done without having possibly the same access or power that others have had.
I have actually done that before and had someone else pitch an idea for me because I was either reading the room or I just felt like it, to your point, it's like, or if there's, you know, there's healthy debate and there's discussions that go on in creative rooms and in media and in entertainment. And so to that point, I agree. It's like, you know, I always put I call it like a gentle pass over things sometimes, and, you know, take a beat because I want the idea to be received as a good idea or as a potential idea versus like this, you know, me presenting the idea, if that makes sense. Also the idea, I guess, of mentorship, you know, so if someone, you know, or someone that looks like you has never been at a company before in a room, then I feel like your chances are probably harder to get into that room or to get in, you know. So if you go through a door, are you opening the door to help someone else that looks like you come through the door? Are you training? Are you being a mentor? I think it just has a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, the whole idea of mentors was one of the biggest things that would pop in my mind because of just the nature of the industry that we work in. It can be very difficult to break through if you didn't have that connection or that relationship already. So if you do have access to mentors, whether those are professors, industry professionals, a teacher at a studio, or someone that you can connect with, you have to leverage that as much as possible. As they say, your network is your net worth type of philosophy, or Issa Rae and a lot of those folks will say network across. So you want to network up, you want to connect to those that can provide value from a higher level, but also those across, because I can't tell you how many folks I work with now, and I look back where we started, and I'm like, oh, we went to school together. Oh, the founder of so-and-so was my classmate. And, we're just all connected, and just maintaining healthy and fruitful relationships where you're providing value is huge. And I think that's a big key as well, as is knowing your worth, but also making sure that you're providing value. And it was alluded to earlier, having your resume, your portfolio, your presentation in place, so that you can provide value. No matter what you're doing, you can provide value and eliminate some of the no's by making it almost impossible for them to say no, because you've done your homework, you know your audience, you know what the needs are, and you're solving a problem. That's really the big thing, is that when I talk to folks that are getting into the entertainment industry, especially on this side, it's like there's a product that you're making, or there's a product that you're delivering, and your thing is you have to solve a problem. That's what led to me founding Creative Cypher. There was a problem that needs to be solved, and oftentimes everything else stems from that desire to fix something or to solve a problem. But you have to know the terrain to understand how to navigate that. And so those are some of the areas that I feel we can do for self to empower our abilities when the institutions say that there's a pipeline issue. A lot of times you look at folks that are doing some amazing things today, and they collaborated with those that were in their own circles. Distribution is totally different now. They built up a following, then they were able to come to the table with leverage and impressions and say, no, I built this show, I put it on YouTube. Everybody has their own journey. There's no one blueprint. But I do feel it's important to look at what you have access to and leverage as much of it as possible, so that when you do get in a position where you have to pitch yourself, you can come strong.
I really, really have appreciated your thoughts on the questions that we have taken up. And I was wondering if you had been able to look at the Aperture 2025 that was shared with us from the Academy Awards, and their plan to begin to require more representation, both in content and certainly in labor. And if you had any thoughts on that.
It sounds great. I think I've heard that a lot of times before, but I feel like we collectively, companies, employees, have to make a commitment to doing the work. So it's one thing to put out a statement and say, we're going to require this, but then, okay, so then who's doing the hiring? What do your recruiters look like? Are they actually reading the resumes? Because look, I appreciate all the jobs that I've gotten, but I have to say in the past 10 years, I have not gotten one job that I applied for. Every single job has been somebody I knew, somebody I worked with, a collaboration, worked with them on a different show, and then they called me up, are you free? So, and I've seen it happen, like there's a job opening for something, but it's being posted sort of like there's an announcement saying, hey, we're looking for a producer, a writer, whatever it is. But then that email account or wherever those applications go is never even touched. And it becomes a game of who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? So I think it's nice to put out a statement, but I would hope that the work is being done behind the scenes and actually reading resumes and doing that research, and hopefully having a whole team of people who are actually trying to recruit and make that happen.
So network, the catch-22, and as Sophia Noble has said, these big companies, she studied Google, for example, they launched this Black Girls Code, which, it's kind of window dressing, because they're like throwing money, and it also implies that there are no Black people that are coding already that they have not hired or interviewed, because they keep hiring and interviewing people that look like them, like Mark Zuckerberg or whoever. And so there is no such thing as a problem of pipeline. There's just a flowing gush, and they're just not looking at it. They're not hiring. And so it's just an excuse. And then to defer it to the next generation, Black Girls Code, then ignores a whole generation, your generation of, people who are highly trained, who are ready to work, and yet not being, somehow they're invisibilized to big tech, and then we also find this in media industries. There's always these other issues. One of the issues I think in Hollywood and film is casting, right? Casting directors that don't have a diverse pool of clients. So when they're asked to cast people, they don't have a lot of people of color in their portfolio and stuff like that. And it also reminds me of, the Canadian government effort to make sure that they have enough Canadian produced content in their media, but it's so hard to, to come up with it, or to decide, well, is this Canadian? I think this person was born in Canada, but lives in LA, or, this was produced in Toronto by a bunch of people from Louisiana. And so it gets very difficult to police and then, like you say, follow through. And as you both said several times, which I think is one of the big takeaway points here, is that so much of the occupational opportunity is achieved through networking, right? And through who you know. And Carrie, it's amazing that you said you've never gotten any job you applied to, but that all the jobs you've gotten is through networking. That's both astounding and a little scary, right?
I actually kept track. So the first job when I moved to Los Angeles after I graduated was the only job that I applied to and got, and it was as a production assistant on a court show. And then after that, I kept files. I was applying to hundreds of jobs in a season, within a span of months, and just not only just not getting them, but not even hearing back, not even saying, hey, we got your resume. Hey, and then I started thinking, I'm like, are they reading my resume? Like, I was like, I thought I was doing okay, went to school, got my degree, but half the battle too, which is what we were talking about earlier, is, do people want to work with you? Like, if you could have a great resume, but if you've not been around people so that they can see how great you are to work with, or if you have been around people and they see you're not great to work with, then that affects your jobs, too. It's not just your skill set and things, but how well you play in the sandbox.
And I hope that you understand how exciting it is for our students to see alum like yourselves who have been successful and are making a difference, because then they can see their path and their future. So how can we best prepare our students so that when they enter media industries, they can contribute to tipping the needle on issues of representation, inclusivity, social justice, to lead to the endurance and reproduction of a democracy?
So I think that it's important to have a cultural relevance component to whatever you are creating. And this was alluded to earlier when Carrie mentioned their war room, not just throwing out creative ideas, but let's hear what's going on, because I have to acknowledge that I don't know everything. I can't do everything. No matter what award or talent, whatever, you need a team. You need other people to be able to lend their ideas, give their perspectives. And that has to be ingrained into the curriculum as well, so that you have a well-rounded storyteller. And it's difficult to tell stories if you're not a great listener. So you need to be able to be observant of the world and see, what's actually going on, but also knowledgeable of how to be a great talent scout and build a team around you, so that you're not telling just a monolithic story. You actually have the ability to expand. How many times have we seen individuals that are successful somewhat stay in a box for a long time because it's difficult to get out? So I think those are just some things that I know would be beneficial to a student that's matriculated in the media, is this understanding you have a skill, you have a talent, but you also have to have a cultural awareness of how to apply those skills that you have so that it can actually have an impact.
Yeah, a couple similar or things on the same note. I mean, for one, I think knowing how to collaborate is such a major thing that if there are moments where we all have to be a leader or we have to step up, but it's also really important to know when to fall back and when to play to your strengths, right? So if one person on your team, say um, you're doing a TV show and it's like one person on your team is a very good writer, let them write, and then don't tell them how to write. Like let them do the writing, and then if somebody else is great at giving reading the room, then maybe they're directing the talent, and then so I think knowing your strengths and being able to bounce back and forth, you don't always need to necessarily be front of the line. Also, I would say, I guess what I would call maybe like proof of hire is really important. So as you're, I didn't realize, like when I was in school, I was just trying to like make it through, right? Like I'm like, okay, when's this due? What is my grade? Like, how can I pass? Like, but if you just think about that, this is your body of work that's going to speak to how you will get hired in your first jobs out of college or whatever, your next moves are. I would say take that as seriously as you would, if you were being paid for a job. So work on your reels and videos and whatever your craft is. I would say try to have a really good representation of that, and use the professors while you have them. That's like, it's like free advice right now. So use that, be able to take critiques, and then also just remembering like there's not a point where if you want to continue to hone your craft and be good at what you do, there's not a point where you made it, right? You always can learn. Like if you're somebody told me if you're the smartest person in the room, you don't want to be in that room. So knowing that walking in, it's like take what you know and then learn from other people, and just know that every single job is different. Every single room, every single project, they're all different.
Well, Troy and Carrie, I really cannot thank you enough for joining us for this conversation. I know that Ebert, viewers, I know that our current students and our alums very much looking forward to this, and we all thank you as a collective, because we could not do this alone. As you all said, we kind of got to work together to do these things. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my honor. Thank you.